I'm so excited to have this conversation today. We're going to get into the numbers, we're going to get into the data, and hopefully create something of a roadmap from the top level of the most important companies, the most important investors, to make some significant progress when it comes to diversity. Ursula Burns joins me. She's got a new initiative. You, of course, know her as the former CEO and chairman of Xerox. We're going to talk about what she's doing when it comes to boards in just a minute. Also, John Winkelried, the co-CEO of TPG, he's been working on this issue as well from the perspective of one of the world's most influential private equity investors. And we also want to thank TPG, of course, for their support of this event. Ursula, I want to start with you. You have put together a very ambitious and important group of people, an important plan. Tell us what you're doing, because you are putting real numbers around something that we need to address.
Yeah, this started pretty simply and pretty, with not a lot of ambition. It was the response to a lot of calls that I was getting, and my brothers and sisters, my Black CEOs, who were getting calls as well right after the George Floyd incident. And it was calls to say, from other CEOs, to say, we think we are doing things okay, but it seems like we may be missing something. Can you help me think through this situation, what's happening in the United States, what's happening all over the world? And I got probably 25 calls. Darren Walker from the Ford Foundation, Ken Chenault, we all got calls from other CEOs and business leaders asking for some insight. And one of the things that became clear was that they were calling us. They didn't have the resource at home that they could actually reach to. Clearly on their boards, they didn't have that resource. They could say, can you give me some insights that would be able to help me and my company, our company, get through this? After these levels of calls, myself and Darren and Gabby Sulzberger, a whole bunch of us were just together thinking and talking and saying, why don't we not become these point people of, here, can you give me a call and get a help? Can we structure something that's reasonable, that is a resource for companies to use and come to if they wanted to do something pretty simple? Because most of these calls were to us as business leaders speaking to CEOs. Could we actually start at the top and structure something that was to get every board in the Fortune 500, the Fortune 1000, Fortune 3000, to have at least one Black director? Pretty straightforward. And no gun to your head, no threats, no, this is all about you doing what will be helpful for you and your company, particularly now. Just do it as a natural initiative. And it turns out that it then snowballs from there. The more people that we talk to, the more we realize that this is something that's good. We're not the only group doing this. This is not the only initiative. This is not the only movement happening. But it was something that we could do that was Black-led. Three Black people, myself, two women, myself, Gabby, Darren, and some people around us as well. We have Teneo helping us. They are helping us with numbers and with process, and actually helping us build up a little bit more of a database. We have the Black Directors Initiative who's engaged. We have the Boulé who's engaged. So there are a large number of people who actually are trying to work on this. We know maybe too many initiatives, but enough such that we can actually make progress on this one simple thing. One Black director on every company that has a board. Let's start with the 3,000. Then we went to try to find out who has what. And it's interesting that the data is horrible. It's not well kept. It's not in a central place. We couldn't, the way that we found out the data is to literally get the list of directors and look at the pictures and make an assessment. Now, right. How do we know if this person is Black or not? So the second thing is about reporting. Can we get self-identification, the directors self-identify, and get some idea of where we are? Because if we don't measure this and look at it, if companies don't measure it and look at this, we're not going to make progress. And then the third plank is basically around support. Can we support? Can we educate? Can we be a resource to these companies and to these boards and to management teams, et cetera, to actually make progress on diversity as a total. We started with Black, but it's not Black only. We started with Black because that's the moment that we're in. But we have women diversity, we have Latina diversity, Latino diversity, there's diversity across the board.
And so, John, I want to turn to you because you and I spoke a year or so ago about some initiatives that you were undertaking largely around including women on the boards of the companies that you were invested in. You have since expanded that. I want to back up a little bit to understand and help the audience understand, why do boards matter so much? Why is there so much focus on the board? It seems maybe a little bit obvious, but I want to put that question to you.
Well, I think the boards are really critical in a number of different respects. I mean, in a private equity context, we bring a lot of capabilities and talents to our companies to help navigate, to help build our businesses, and our boards are an integral part of that. The private equity approach in governance in private company situations is slightly different, but not, it's not entirely different than public companies. But in a private context, we're trying to invest in companies, create value. And one of the things that we do in particular at TPG, it's done across the private equity industry, but one of the things that we are very focused on as a firm and proud of is that we're very engaged with our companies. And so I would say, if I had to boil it down, I would say engagement with our companies to help our companies grow, help our companies navigate problems on one hand, and on the other hand, I would say having an investor mindset around the table is often an important thing in terms of accountability and driving growth and improving our companies. And so quality of people that we have around our boards is paramount. And so a year ago when we got together and talked about this, Jason, I think one of the things that we felt was really important was having a group sitting around those tables that are adding value, that are diverse and inclusive, and really are focusing on bringing great talent to the boards of our companies, so that we help drive and navigate the future. And I think, as we talked about last year, we had launched an initiative that was focused initially on gender diversity, where we would bring at least one woman to the boards of all the companies that we either controlled or had great influence on. And to date, we've added about 82 or 83 women. I lost count, but about 82 or 83 women to the boards of our companies. If you look through the quality of people associated with that list, you would be blown away. I mean, the feedback and the resonance that we've had from our CEOs and from our management teams has been really awesome. But they've added an incredible dimension of expertise, advice, guidance, counsel to the CEOs of our portfolio companies, and by the way, to our deal leads at TPG.
Right.
And by the way, of those 82 women, 21% of them are either racially or ethnically diverse as well. And now, as you mentioned, we've kind of expanded the framework of our board initiative.
And so, Ursula, how soon will we know whether this is working? And before we started this interview, if you don't mind, I'm going to share something that you said, which is, and I'm looking at a picture of the three of us, and here you are talking to two bald white guys. This is all going to come down to everybody getting together and actually making a decision to make this happen. How confident are you, and how soon will we know that we can actually do this?
I think that I am going to punt that question over to everyone listening to this call who currently are sitting on boards, because that's where this is going to happen at that level. It's not going to happen because myself and some colleagues started this thing called the Board Diversity Action Alliance. It's not going to drive anything. It's going to happen in your homes, in your company's homes, in your boardrooms. And the reason why we'll know is that I think that we're at a little bit of an inflection point in the United States, for sure, where it's not just Black people who are sitting here saying, I want to be engaged, I want to be involved. You know, this is part of our pie. It's not you, you don't own this pie, we all own it together. Society is saying this more. The pandemic has helped with this. Women have been pushing for a long time. And so I think what's happening is that this idea that we can be like we were in the past and still be successful and have a silent set of people out there not making noise about it is long gone. So I think that we're going to see progress, not because the Board Diversity Action Alliance has started. We're going to see progress because in the boardrooms, they will realize, they already realize that they cannot stay where they are, that they're going to have to move because society is pushing them to move. And as John said, there is absolutely no debate or discussion about lower quality or poorer outcomes. It's no longer a debate. This is natural. I mean, they've been doing it for a year with women. Other companies have been engaged for a while, and we see absolutely no diminution of quality. So why the heck aren't we doing it already? Is the big question. And how will we know we're successful? You're not going to hear it from me. You're not going to hear the Board Diversity Action Alliance doing a report card next year. I would like you guys to start asking the question. I like the stakeholders in the companies to start asking the question. We have customers, you have other board members, you have investors who should be saying, consumers, what the heck is going on? Do you have, right. Does your board look like me? And if the answer is no, then I'm not going to tell. I mean, the other stakeholders should tell.
So, John, let's pick up right on that point, because there has to be pressure from a number of different constituencies, as Ursula just said. And I do wonder, are you sensing that from the customers of the companies that you invest in? And are you sensing it from the sources of capital? Because those are the two, I understand enough about private equity to be dangerous. Those are the two big constituencies. Those are the stakeholders that ultimately you have to answer to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's a really important question. I think Jason, you and I have talked about this before. I think it's evolving. I would say that the volume, I think, just as a general statement, I would say the volume is still lower than you would like it to be. The providers of capital, our LPs, I think, are slowly recognizing that they can't be silent. By the way, their constituencies, the stakeholders they represent, are by and large extremely diverse, and so I think that slowly but surely, again, these sort of institutional kind of framework biases that exist are kind of slowly but surely getting broken down a little bit. And the evidence of that to me is that, I'd say over the last year, I think a year ago when we talked about this, I would say that I was underwhelmed at that point by the sources of capital, the volume with which they were focused on this, when our LPs are asking us questions about these very questions in terms of whether it's board diversity, whether it's C-suite diversity at our portfolio companies, whether it's our own diversity as allocators of capital. And I think it's moved within the last year. But I think that those that are really kind of focused on sort of the core issues and the core problems, I would say they're a little fewer and far between than I would like them to be. I'll give you an example. I mean, we recently received a letter from New York Common, and we had a conference call as a follow-up to that, which I participated in. And their letter was really starting to get at more of kind of the texture of this problem. And so I applaud them for doing it. I also had a call recently with the Texas Teachers Retirement System, and I think they were kind of getting at some of these issues in a more deliberate way. They're not the only two, obviously, but those are examples. But beyond that, I would say in the Q&A type responses that we get from LPs when they're looking at fund product, like DDQs is what we call them in the industry. There's been a steady increase in the number of inquiries on this topic, but that's not enough. Customers of our portfolio companies, I think, by and large, vote with their feet. They decide whether or not they want to do business. If, depending on where they are in these issues, they depend on how they want to do business and who they want to do business with. But I will say that our CEOs of our portfolio companies are extremely sensitive to these issues and are very focused. I've had more calls with CEOs of our portfolio companies really wanting to get underneath these issues and understand what TPG's perspectives are, what our value system is related to this. I've had more calls with our CEOs than I actually have with our LPs on this issue. So I think it's not yet in balance, but I think it's moving in the right direction. But I think it's still got a ways to go.
One of the reasons
Ursula,
why it's very important to have diversity on the board is so that this question doesn't get pushed out of the boardroom, right? So it's not the responsibility, obviously, of the diverse board member to bring it up, but it's really hard to have a diverse board member and not have the topic happen. So as John said, you just have to let's bring it up and have the conversations. And once you get through the many layers, that you have to get through, you get down to the base reason why you don't have diversity, and generally there isn't one. It's because you're lazy or because the normal, I just don't know who they are. We can help you with all of that. We can find the people, we can train all of that. If you really want to do it, which there's no indication that there's anything bad with wanting to do it. If you want to do it, we can help you do that.
And so, Ursula, I want to press that point a little bit, which is it extends presumably into the C-suite, as John was just alluding to. What are the mechanisms that we should be thinking about to ensure that if it starts with the board, if this is successful as we want it to be, how does it then filter into the senior levels? Because you guys know much more about this than I do, but everybody talks about, oh, we've got this pipeline problem, and if we just solve the pipeline problem at the entry level. But we also know there's a massive problem in the C-suite, and then as you go down into the senior ranks. We don't have time to even address that problem in many ways in this conversation today. But what's the starting point for that next step, Ursula?
Well, I think it's definitely at the board level. The board will not solve everything, but they set the tone of the company. They definitely set the tone that happens in the C-suite. So if they get it, then the C-suite will either get it or be changed such that they can get it, and then it trickles down. This is not going to be a fast solution, right? We're not going to wake up tomorrow and have a diverse, top 3 layers of any company, for sure. But I think if we can start, like any problem, if you can start and we'll make progress, look at what's happened with women CEOs. Look what happened with women board members. We literally, unfortunately, had to regulate it to make progress, which I think is a good outcome if you fail on your own. But you regulate it to make progress, and out of nowhere came these unbelievable women CEOs, 30-something of them, and unbelievable number of women board members. TPG is an example of how you can find them. So they're there. We have to change a little bit the spec, which we're willing to help with as well. The specifications are very different for for Black people, very different. You have to be a past CEO or CFO, then you can get on the board. But we know that that's like a very small population. So there's a whole bunch of things you have to work around. This is not going to happen tomorrow, and it's not going to be easy, and it's not someone else's problem. The most important thing is you can't look to the Board Diversity Alliance. You can't look to the Board Directors Challenge. You can't look to all of these other these little initiatives, big or little initiatives, to solve the problem. The companies, starting at the board level, have to actually take the lead. And if that happens, we can make progress. We know it. It's like everything starts, rot starts at the top, but also solutions generally start at the top. So let's engage in a way that actually makes progress versus debate it and track it and try to figure out a way around it. It's possible. I'm hopeful that it's possible.
So, John, how hopeful are you? I mean, you've been, working on this now, and obviously this takes on a new sense of urgency, which I think we're all feeling. How do you feel about this as we head into, another uncertain year, to say the least, here in the United States, at least?
Well, I'm optimistic on the basis that as Ursula said, it's not going to happen on its own, but I think more people are feeling passionate about driving change. I think I will say that in the process of initiating our board diversity effort, and by the way, we are I think we're the first private equity signer onto Ursula's
Thank
board
you.
diversity.
Thank
So
you. You are the first prize, and you're the best of them
we're
all. So we're pleased.
we're excited about the
Breaking
collaboration.
news right here at the Equality Summit. I love it.
But I will say that we are the secondary effects and sort of the related effects of this effort become so identifiable and so tangible. We have, in the process of identifying these women to put on our boards, I told Ursula this yesterday, we developed a database. We have over 1,000 women in this database who have incredible experiences, incredible capabilities, want to serve in a board capacity in some way, shape, or form, whether it's public or private or whatever. So we're going to collaborate with respect to that. I think that the whole racial justice movement that we've been living through over the last 3, 4, 5 months has catalyzed people to the next level on this. People realize that there are just institutional impediments, that the only way we break through them is that people have the will to break through them. And I think where you see that taken up, we make progress. We make progress. So it's not going to happen on its own. People have to have the will. People have to have the focus. But I'm optimistic. I just think that the conversation is becoming more real. I'm optimistic that we're going to make more progress.